Welcome back to lovely story time, everyone. We are so happy to see you again in this exciting journey. Today, we will continue to explore part 13 to 18 of the story, After Breaking Apollo's Heart. Grab your snacks, take a seat, and explore this story together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. Let's get started. Chapter 13, Arrogance is His Instinct. You called me Apollo, didn't answer. Speaking as if to himself. One more thing you may pray before my statue, but you're forbidden from entering the hall behind it. His casual tone made it seem like he hadn't just killed their conversation, as if he'd merely remembered a detail and was continuing their earlier discussion about the coming days. Even with the golden arrow tugging at her heart, Daphne was momentarily speechless. She didn't respond, and Apollo held his silence. Love didn't mean surrendering her will or pride entirely. Plenty others would grovel before him. She didn't want him thinking she'd endlessly tolerate his attitude. But she couldn't snap at him, or rashly demand why his demeanour had flipped. If he wanted distance and formality, she'd play along. Yes, I'll follow your orders, Daphne said, bowing her head. After a beat, she maintained her docile expression and reported candidly, While you're away, I request your permission to leave Delphi occasionally. The nymphs invited me to join them for some fun. Making new friends could distract me, easing the pain of the golden arrow. I hope you'll allow it. Apollo's gaze sharpened for a fleeting moment. She met his eyes. Of course, I'll keep my promise to offer fresh flowers daily. The subtle shift in his expression rippled and stilled. His flawless face and features betrayed no glimpse of his true thoughts. In a cold, declarative tone, he said, I don't need your flowers. You offer, I accept. That's all. Daphne faltered, unsure if his hardened stance was a good sign or a flashing warning of a downward spiral. He wasn't done. While the golden arrow binds you, stay in the lodging I provided, and I'll ensure your safety. But you're free to leave any time, back to Arcadia or anywhere else. I don't care to know. I won't, and don't need to. Stop you from doing anything. He paused, his tone heavier. Don't test me. There won't be a next time. As expected. Nothing escaped a god's keen senses. Apollo had heard every word of the nymph's chatter, including the invitation to meet Narcissus. Daphne's face paled. Then she smiled, her signature sharp, slightly mocking grin. Nothing escapes your eyes. I did wonder if you'd feel even a flicker of jealousy. Forgive me, though I know it's impossible. The arrow sparks foolish thoughts. Apollo's lips tightened, as if holding back words itching to spill. Then, please excuse me. Once again. Daphne turned to leave. Apollo instinctively wanted to look away but forced himself to hold steady. To avoid her retreating figure because of prophetic visions. Absurd. Eros's wretched arrow had thrown him off balance. Thinking of the love god. A flicker of anger rose, mixed with self-directed frustration. He shouldn't have taunted Eros, mocking his arrows as weak, comparing his golden bow to a child's toy. True, in a direct clash, Eros wouldn't stand a chance. His arrows, loosed from that delicate bow, couldn't truly harm Apollo's divine form. But Eros had countless ways to annoy and torment him. His mother, Leto, had sighed and urged him many times to temper his pride, but arrogance was his instinct. To Apollo, most beings were ants. The gap wasn't his choice. He was born this way. Expecting him to stoop, to sink into the dust with them, to grasp their thoughts and feelings, wasn't impossible, just pointless. Yet he considered that, in some future, he might indeed fall for a nymph named Daphne for bizarre reasons. There was still time. If he chose, he could dodge that tedious possibility. Leaving Delphi, staying away from her, would swiftly restore his calm. He had bigger matters to attend to. For instance, Atlas's daughter Maia was reportedly pregnant, meaning Zeus would soon have another child. Apollo's standing among the Olympians was far from secure, with countless potential enemies and allies. A new divine birth could stir waves, so he needed to fully master his prophetic powers, build the temple, select priests, and deliver 3 prophecies about earth, sea, and sky, then see them fulfilled. A mere nymph was insignificant by comparison. In a flash of thought, Apollo's form became a streak of light, leaving Parnassus far behind. Following faint prophetic threads, he crossed the Peloponnese in a day, soared over the Gulf, and reached the sea near Crete. A sailing ship bound for Pylos rode the wind northwest. Apollo planned to observe the travellers, ensuring their integrity qualified them as Delphi's priests. In an instant, he altered his size and appearance, landing silently beneath the wind-filled white sail. The sailors on either side of the deck were oblivious to the god's arrival. Stroke by stroke, the narrow oars rhythmically struck the water, the merchant ship slicing through gentle waves along the coast. By sunset, with the ship's cramped hold full of olive oil and cloth, the captain anchored at a shallow beach for the night. The crew lit a fire on the shore, smoke curling toward the sky's dome. Before bedding down, they poured wine into the sea, praying to Poseidon for a safe journey tomorrow. Apollo could hear such prayers. When a god's name was invoked or prayers offered before their statue, the words reached their consciousness, statues acting as divine avatars. Whether the god heard was another matter. Murmurs had existed since a god's name became known. Unless deliberately passed, prayers, curses, laughter, and tears blended into a stream like tides or wind, meaningless to a god. Responding to devotees' prayers was necessary, as was punishing the irreverent. Apollo split his thoughts. One avatar granted healing to a fevered child in a northern village. Another sent plague to a king who insulted Leto's son. As he dispensed blessings and punishments, he kept a slight watch on the Delphi statue's surroundings. After nightfall, the temple-building mortals left, leaving only the soft rustle of trees. He hadn't expected prayers from there anyway. Moonset, sunrise, a new day. At dawn, the sailors pushed the ship into the rising tide, and Apollo boarded silently again. Few mortals called his name then, making a familiar voice stand out sharply. "Glorious Apollo, I've brought flowers as promised." Through the Delphi statue's eyes, Apollo saw a large bundle of daisies at its base. Then Daphne's vivid golden hair in the dim morning light, unlike devotees raising arms to the sky. She struck an odd pose, fingers clasped at her chest, head bowed, eyes closed. She opened her eyes, tilting her head to study the unpainted statue, muttering, "The temple's not done. You probably can't hear me." Apollo raised an eyebrow. "On the ship, of course." The Delphi statue remained still. Daphne seemed to relax, speaking as if to herself. "Yesterday afternoon, I asked the rock giants for help. They took me deep into the forest to dig up flowers and bulbs. I planted them around the stone house. By the time you return, I promise they'll be thriving. I hope you'll like them. All I can offer you is flowers," she said, a soft sigh escaping. After a long pause, her voice dropped. "I hope you're not still mad about me testing you. But you called me over at such a perfect moment. How could I not overthink it?" Apollo's lip twitched. Daphne yawned, the light brightening, revealing faint shadows under her eyes. Her tone stretched, whining in the same way she had when mistaking him for his sister. Sleepiness made her playfully petulant. "Ugh, I barely slept last night. I couldn't stop thinking if you met a nymph or mortal you truly fancied on your journey. How ridiculous my situation would be. Ugh, no use thinking about it. I'm done. I'll come talk to you again tomorrow." She smiled, as if amused by this one-sided, unnoticed confession. Apollo's lips curved slightly. Her cluelessness in odd moments was almost funny, but the moment he noticed, the smile vanished. Did she really think he couldn't hear? Suspicion flared again. She was like a cat, bold, under-vigilant, and prone to wandering, always scheming harmless mischief. This was likely another petty ploy to grab his attention. Apollo resolved if she rambled at the statue again tomorrow, he wouldn't listen. But the next day, her first sentence hooked him. "Yesterday. I ended up near that creepy pool again." Apollo closed his eyes, unwilling to see her innocent, foolish face. "I swear it wasn't on purpose. I saw some wild lilies I wanted to dig up, but somehow, after passing a bush, Hera's mirror shard pool was right there. I bolted instantly, didn't even get close." Daphne sounded frustrated. "But after that, I couldn't find those lilies anywhere." She went on about transplanting irises sprouting new leaves, which flowers she moved, and other trivia. Apollo soon tuned her out, ignoring her words. The third morning, at the same hour, her voice rippled through his divine consciousness again. He tried to block her out, but her brief report ended almost as it began. The mountain nymphs from before came to chat again. "We're going out to play today. I wonder if Narcissus is as beautiful as they say. I'll come back tomorrow." Daphne left the flowers and went. Apollo's expression didn't change. He turned to other morning prayers. On the fourth day, thick fog blanketed the sea. Daphne was late. Not until the sun's chariot nearly burned through the mist did she appear. "The trip was farther than I thought. I got back to Delphi before dawn, only managing to pick fresh anemones from the garden. I hope you don't mind," she said, pausing with a self-mocking chuckle. "Not that you can hear me." Daphne shook her head. "Rallying? Oh, I saw Narcissus. He's definitely a beautiful boy, almost unnaturally so. His lips, especially, are redder, prettier than flower-dyed stains." Apollo noted the anemones she brought were a vivid red too. A faint irritation stirred in him, not jealousy. That was a fool's emotion, just anger at being slighted by impure intentions. The sea wind surged, the ship's sail bowing into a half-circle. The captain shouted, urging the sailors to steady the ropes, keeping the ship from veering into dangerous deep waters. In calm Delphi, Daphne, oblivious, continued, "But he doesn't compare to you. In my eyes now, no one's beauty outshines your radiant glory." Chapter 14. Another face in his mind. The sea wind roared in and faded just as fast. Daphne was still muttering. "Even if I praised your timeless beauty to your face, you wouldn't care. So, I'll sneak it in where you can't hear." Apollo almost laughed, rushing around all night. Her stamina likely hadn't recovered. Mid-sentence, she sank to the base of the statue, hugging her knees. Narcissus is so arrogant, ignoring everyone. I didn't care. But the others were livid, saying, "Who does he think he is, just a river god's son? Not Zeus's heir like Apollo." Apollo's eyes narrowed. Her words felt loaded. There's a nymph named Echo who can't speak properly. Somehow, she only repeats what others say. No surprise. She couldn't talk to Narcissus. But she's stubborn, refusing anyone else, impossible to sway, like she's been struck by a golden arrow too. Silence fell. Daphne rested her face on her knees, murmuring, "Do others see me and Echo as the same? At least for me, this will pass." She might not be so lucky. Apollo stood in the sail's shadow, his expression unreadable. Daphne sat wordlessly beneath the statue for a long time, slipping away only when the temple-building mortals drew near. Apollo shifted his focus back to the sailors. Yesterday, he'd placed gold, silver, and coral treasures on nearby reefs. But the cautious, honest crew hadn't been swayed by greed, steering clear of the dazzling hoard. Now he needed to test their resolve, ensuring they wouldn't waver. He strode to the ship's stern and dove cleanly into the deep blue waves. The splash caught a few sailors' attention. Did something fall overboard? Before they could answer, a massive shape leaped from the sea, crashing onto the deck with a thud. The sailors shouted, yanking ropes to steady the ship. When they looked, a giant dolphin lay in the centre, seawater pooling around it. Strangely, its grey body shimmered with a persistent layer of water, like a second skin, shielding it from drying out. A bold sailor took a step closer, and the dolphin thrashed, its tail fin slamming the deck. The ship's planks groaned, threatening to capsize. An older sailor, seasoned and quick, barked, "That's no ordinary dolphin. Stay back and pray to the sea god for guidance." After pouring sacrificial wine into the sea, the south wind grew fiercer, speeding the ship. The sailors, suppressing their unease, returned to their oars, eager to find a harbour. As long as they didn't provoke it, the dolphin lay still, but if anyone dared approach, it bared sharp teeth, and the ship rocked violently. After a nerve-wracking day, the exhausted sailors collapsed when they reached shore. The dolphin leaped back into the water and vanished. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Unseen by mortals, a figure appeared on the far bank of the shallows. A golden-haired, blue-eyed youth watched them silently, fading into the deepening night. That dolphin was Apollo's avatar. The next day, shortly after the ship left the coast, water sprayed, and the massive dolphin crashed onto the deck again. This time, the sailors were calmer. Since the dolphin showed no hostility and couldn't be driven off, they ignored it. It vanished at departure, reappeared at sea for 3 days straight. Daphne kept her morning ritual, bringing flowers to the Delphi statue and recounting her day. Maintaining the dolphin form was dull, so Apollo didn't mind sparing some attention to her chatter for amusement. Eros claimed the golden arrow would torment her with lovesickness, but without him, her days seemed full. Apollo's temple complex in Delphi was taking shape. After Python's death, wolves flooded the nearby woods, prompting more guards to prevent attacks. One day, leaving after offering flowers, Daphne was nearly chased as a suspected thief by patrolling soldiers. She'd planned to fight back, but once they saw her face, they stammered, unable to act. Her transplanted garden roses suffered a spider infestation, caught just in time to save them. Parnassus's nymphs often visited, praising her woven flower crowns. She still seemed miffed he hadn't accepted hers in person. Another day, rock giants took her to a hidden valley waterfall. She jumped from the top. Risky, but her slight water powers ensured a safe dive. She found it thrilling, repeating it until the mountain god's servants refused to bring her back. Apollo thought unsettling burly rock giants was a talent. Yet another day, en route to the temple, she stumbled near the cursed mirror shard pool again. Or rather, it found her. Her face was pale as she stared at the statue as, asking softly, "When are you coming back?" Draped in fine fabrics from devotees, the statue stayed silent. Apollo mentally tallied his time away from Delphi. 7 days. The sailors' trials were nearly done, and he was pleased with them. It was time to guide them to Delphi. On the 8th morning, Daphne didn't show. Not until Helios's sun chariot reached the ocean's edge. Not until the temple's new columns were cloaked in the night goddess's veil. Did she appear? Maybe the relentless curse scared her into staying put at the stone house. As long as she remained there, she was safe. He didn't care if she offered flowers daily anyway. Apollo resumed his true form, listened briefly to the sailors' talk, and slipped away to the rocky outcrop at the shallow's end. Something lurked in the sunset's orange-red and grey-black waves. As he approached, figures surfaced, sea nymphs, sons of Leto and Zeus. "We bring greetings from your uncle, Poseidon, lord of the seas, at sea." Little escaped Poseidon's notice. Apollo's brow furrowed faintly. "Return my greetings to Poseidon. I'm here to select my priests, not to stir trouble. Of course, Poseidon knows your intent. If we can assist, command us." One nymph lifted a massive ivory seashell, offering it with both hands. It brimmed with pale golden liquid, ambrosial nectar, a small gift from Poseidon to quench your thirst. Apollo accepted, asking casually, "Will storms strike in the coming days?" The sea nymphs exchanged glances, replying in unison. "That depends on Poseidon's will." As expected, Poseidon wanted something, or he wouldn't have sent nymphs. Apollo had little fondness for his uncle. Poseidon was cunning, always draping stark transactions in a flimsy veil of warmth. What does Poseidon want? He hopes. Once you master prophecy, you'll visit his palace and offer him a personal oracle. In return, he'll ensure extra care for your chosen ship at sea. Not an unreasonable request. But since it was Poseidon, Apollo stayed wary. "I haven't decided on this ship yet." The nymphs answered together, "We'll follow the ship. Summon us any time." Apollo nodded. Message delivered. The nymphs lingered, leaning on the reef's edge, openly eyeing him with curiosity. Each nymph kind had unique traits. Sea nymphs were known for pearl-like skin and bold personalities. Yet, facing these girls, another face flashed unbidden in Apollo's mind. He tensed his jaw, blinking hard. His features, taut, screamed, "Keep out!" The puzzled nymph silently sank back into the water. Selene's moon chariot rose, its cold white glow rippling on the sea, reminding Apollo of the untouchable Skirtim from his prophetic visions. Maybe he should contact the Parnassus mountain god to check on Daphne's safety. The thought barely formed before he crushed it. If he kept this up, the vision wouldn't stay a vision. It could become real. That was what he had to avoid. Besides, he'd warned that restless nymph. Her safety was her own responsibility. He didn't need to, waste more thought on her. Apollo steeled himself. Yet the next morning, Daphne was still absent. An ominous feeling like thorny vines crept into Apollo's heart. Chapter 15. He had to find her. On the 5th day of the dolphin's appearance, the Cretan sailors noticed it had grown more volatile. A single glance from an oarsman triggered a furious slap of its broad tail against the deck, the jarring noise rattling their nerves. After hushed talks, the captain and the elder sailor decided to abandon their planned route, docking early at Cape Matapan, the Peloponnese's southern tip, hoping to shake off the strange creature. Soon, the crew rowed hard under orders, but no matter how they angled the ship, the cape remained a distant speck on the horizon, unmoving. Great Poseidon, please help us. The dolphin, as if enraged by the captain's prayer, let out a sharp, rapid burst of clicks. The south wind surged, bloating the sails into taut arcs, threatening to tear. Amid the sailors' cries, the ship rode the gale, slicing through waves at a speed oars couldn't match, streaking past Cape Matapan. The crew was stunned, some dropping oars into the sea, arms limp. But the ship needed no helmsman. Ropes and oars abandoned, it followed a divine command, racing across the sea. At night, the eerie wind didn't relent. Ignoring the sailors' fearful pleas, wind and tide carried the ship through twilight, bypassing their intended stop at Pylos, hurtling north along the Peloponnese's west coast. At this unnatural speed, reaching Delphi's nearby beach would take another day. Even flying with divine power, Apollo would need half a day. He didn't dwell on why he'd suddenly urged the ship to race back to Delphi. It was obvious, no need to overthink. He was pleased with the passengers, ready to grant them priesthood and glory. He should get them to Delphi swiftly, before other gods meddled. But as night faded, Apollo grew inexplicably restless. Suspecting the dolphin form muddled his thoughts, he shed the avatar, leaving a sliver of divine will within it. Then he perched atop the mast, gazing at the misty dawn sea. Helios would soon drive his sun chariot onto the sky's track, parting the morning fog to flood the earth with light. Apollo knew he was waiting, but for what he didn't know, the sun broke the horizon, rising above the azure waves. Day broke. Voices reached Apollo's consciousness through the Delphi statue. None were Daphne's. In that moment, when her voice didn't come, Apollo had to admit he'd been waiting for her, flowers in hand. He quickly justified it. He'd promised to keep her safe until the golden arrow's effect faded. Regardless of whether his visions came true, he was duty-bound to ensure she didn't die on his watch. Even if she was playing hard to get, she wouldn't vanish for days. He suspected she'd stumbled into serious trouble. He had to find her. The conclusion brought an odd sense of relief. The rest were details. The temple wasn't finished, his prophetic powers unsteady. Delphi's anchor wasn't strong enough for him to send an avatar. To find Daphne, he had to return in person. Sailing versus flying differed by half a day. A blink for a god, easily spent answering prayers or sorting thoughts. But once decided, there was no reason to delay. A moment could mean life or death. Apollo vanished from the mast, reappearing at the stern. I have urgent business. Tell Poseidon to guide this ship to Delphi swiftly. I'll visit his palace and give the prophecy he wants. A sea nymph, astride a dolphin, leaped from the waves. As you wish, son of Leto. Will relay your message to Poseidon. Yes, before she finished. Apollo was gone. Apollo raced to the cursed pool in Delphi's woods. Daphne had twice mentioned unwittingly nearing the sinister water formed from Hera's mirror shards. A third time wasn't impossible. If she'd fallen prey to the pool, he'd be too late. The image of pulling her from the water, drenched, deathly pale, flashed in his mind, lingering like a needle piercing his thoughts. No, he dismissed it instantly. The foreseen future wasn't yet real. She couldn't, shouldn't, die now. A counterthought emerged. He could have waited until the temple was complete before seeking priests. Recognizing Daphne as the figure in his visions had spurred his hasty departure from Delphi. Fate's patterns weren't fixed. In dodging one future, he hadn't considered the cost. Another path might erase her life alongside the visions. Apollo's lips pressed into a hard line. He forced his thoughts to halt, scanning his surroundings. He'd landed near the pool by memory, but after a second loop, he couldn't find the path. Without the mountain god's guidance, The wretched pool eluded him. His lightning-swift thoughts froze. The mountain god, he should have summoned him first, forgetting that was a lapse. Then it hit him, failing to find Hera's resentment-fueled pool meant he wasn't tormented by love. Apollo felt a faint relief, but now wasn't the time. Parnassus, I need your aid. The mountain god emerged from the rocks. Son of Leto, what is your command? Where's Daphne? She should be near the stone house your servants built. For 3 days. She hasn't left the wooded slope you cleared. So, she hasn't fallen into the pool. The god paused, startled. Lardon's daughter was tempted by Hera's mirror shards again, but she resisted each call and escaped. Apollo couldn't help rubbing his brow. Good. At least she hadn't drowned. Parnassus studied him, his gravelly voice steady. You didn't find her at the house. I can't see into a god's domain. So I know nothing of what's inside. Apollo didn't answer. He abandoned flight, striding swiftly, accelerating. Instead of easing his unnamed frustration, his irritation grew. Daphne was fine, so what game was she playing Zeus's golden-haired son crossed Delphi's woods in a blink? Reaching the sunlit slope where Daphne lived, he stopped short. The slope was a flowing sea of flowers, lilies, roses, irises, daisies, anemones, poppies, lilies of the valley. Flowers she'd mentioned and others unnamed, bloomed out of season, ignoring their staggered cycles, swaying in the afternoon sun, dancing with breezes and butterflies. The colours flooding Apollo's vision were so vivid they stung, brimming with life that seemed ready to drip. For a moment, he didn't know where to look. Was this what Daphne wanted him to see? An elaborate surprise. His gaze sharpened. On closer inspection, the garden circling the house only seemed vibrant. Weeds sprouted among the flowers. Beneath wilting blooms, leaves drooped, edges curled, some yellowing. With daily care, this shouldn't happen. Apollo flashed to the stone house's door. Silence lay beyond the wooden door. He pushed, and it creaked open. The interior was unnaturally dark. Apollo frowned. He'd had the rock giants carve light vents when building the house. His divine senses pierced the gloom, revealing the doorway's state. He saw branches, twisted, overlapping, coiling at eerie angles, filling the space. The entire house was choked with them. Perplexed, Apollo reached to clear the nearest branches, stepping forward. His brows shot up the slender twigs, as if alive, flinched from his rough touch, trembling. The already curling, half-yellow leaves quivered, each radiating fear. He raised a hand, and pure, sacred light burst from his palm, flooding the house. The strange branches, like scattered threads, formed a hollow, swaying green cocoon. On closer look, the branches didn't encase the cocoon from outside. They grew from within, stretching outward, weaving a cage-like structure. At the cocoon's centre, a figure curled tight. She hugged her knees in a pitiful ball, golden brown hair spilling over, frail. Malnourished branches sprouted from her hair, trembling faintly, encasing her and filling the room. Apollo froze, stunned, before whispering, "Daphne." The figure shuddered, bearing her head deeper. Her voice was steady but fragile, on the verge of breaking from within Apollo. "What do? I think I'm sprouting." Chapter 16, Closer Than Imagined. Daphne had only meant to skip one day, testing if Apollo would react differently, chatting daily, sharing her life until he grew used to her presence, then vanishing for a day or two to lure him into making the first move. It was a tired old chase tactic, but it worked. She didn't expect Apollo to rush back to check on her, but maybe next time she showed up, he'd deign to appear through his statue and ask where she'd been. That would be a perfect sign. After idling in the garden for a day, Daphne woke to find slender green branches in her vision. Lately, she'd been zoning out, plagued by nightmares she couldn't recall, leaving her mood low at dawn. Instinctively, she swatted the mysterious branches, only to feel a sharp tug at her scalp, like yanking tangled hair. Staring at the sprigs, she bolted upright, slowly raising a hand to her head. The branches were woven into her hair, lengthening noticeably as she fumbled. After a stunned moment, the bizarre reality sank in. like a potato left too long in a cupboard. She was sprouting. In a blink, the branches kept growing, shoots unfurling, glossy oval leaves stretching, their jagged edges sharpening, tips pointed and proud. Her first instinct was to call Eros. No! She clapped both hands over her mouth. Who knew if Apollo had spies in this house? Eros had said gods couldn't peer into each other's domains. This slope, with its stone house, was Apollo's sacred ground, safe from beasts but beyond Eros's reach. What now? It wasn't just the branches. Her body burned, blood like flowing fire, each heartbeat sending faint but undeniable stabs through her. She tried staggering to the door for help, but halfway across the short distance, her strength gave out. The thriving branches were new limbs, sharing her pain, greedily sapping her energy. Dizzy, Daphne wandered in circles, twice nearly tripping on the ever-lengthening branches sprouting from her head. Then she stepped on one, pain buckling her to the floor. She couldn't stand. Shock gave way to fear. Looking down, she saw faint lines on her fingertips, like tree bark. She reached for her face but stopped herself. She'd rather not know what she looked like. Was this her body reverting to its plant origins? Was her time up so soon? No surprise. Eros wasn't exactly a kind god. Had she failed? Her mind buzzed, like a hammer striking her head. She'd made a mistake letting Apollo leave Delphi. She should have clung to him shamelessly. But would it have mattered? His days of silence, ignoring her, said everything. Her thoughts sank into a swamp of despair. She knew her state was wrong, but she couldn't fight the bleak tide. 1, 2, 3. Dark, self-loathing thoughts bubbled up, choking her. Her vision dimmed. Was it tears or the branches blocking the windows? She didn't know, too drained to check. As her senses numbed, time lost meaning. She curled up, waiting for the end, for death's second arrival. Then, abruptly, light. She heard the branches sprouting from her rustle, craving the glow, like a monster stirring its tentacles. Revulsion surged, but she resisted looking up, hugging herself tighter. Daphne. It took a moment to realize the voice wasn't a hallucination. She had to respond but didn't know what to say, her heartbeat deafening. She couldn't confess she was a construct made for him, unable to explain this. Her lips parted and closed, and she heard herself say, in a surprisingly steady tone, something foolish. Apollo! What do I do? I think I'm sprouting. He took a deep breath, clearly at a loss. In the uneasy silence, Daphne sensed clear, light footsteps approaching through every leaf on her branches, catching the sacred to serene scent of an Olympian god. The burning in her veins eased, and she yearned to draw closer, to soak in more, then jolted. She couldn't let Apollo see her like this. She didn't want him remembering her in more disgrace. Don't come closer. She covered her face, shouting, her branches snapping shut, forming a tight barrier around her. Apollo didn't flinch, grabbing a branch to push it aside, moving to break through. Daphne gasped. It hurts. His movement paused, just for a moment. Then he resumed, deftly untangling the branches, his touch far gentler than it looked, careful not to hurt her again. She tried wielding the branches to block him, but his fingertips glowed with sacred light. Touched branches shrank like rung sponges, softening instantly, blending into her golden brown hair like leaf-adorned braids. The leafy barrier collapsed in moments. Apollo released the final branch, but its tip, reluctant, curled around his finger before retreating, like a small animal's tail seeking affection. Daphne, oblivious, remained curled up, head buried lower. Apollo's hand dropped, clenching briefly. After a pause, he broke the silence. What happened? Her fingers tightened on her arms, voice hoarse. I don't know. I woke up, and branches were growing from my head. Her throat burned, she realized, parched from days without water. So that's why you stopped bringing flowers to my statue. It took her a moment to process. Oh, right, the flowers. Her mind, sluggish like melted clouds, couldn't muster a defense, so she stayed silent. You've been hiding here all this time. She nodded. Apollo watched her wordlessly, his lips tightening, tone hardening. "Why didn't you call for me?" It took her a few beats to meet his gaze, her lower face still hidden behind her arms. Apollo blinked, as if ensuring she wasn't an illusion. Her pale green eyes, once blazing, were dull, heavy with the bone-deep exhaustion of the chronically ill. He'd seen that look in countless mortals begging for healing. It didn't suit her. She dropped her gaze, clearing her throat, voice still raspy. "How was I supposed to call you? Say my name. Pray to me." Daphne fell silent. He couldn't see her face, but knew she was smiling, that sharp, mocking grin. After a moment, she said softly, "I forgot I could do that." Apollo said nothing. I'd rather do nothing than pray and get ignored. Her branches, including the one that had curled around his finger, drooped, leaves curling. She seemed done pretending, or just exhausted, her words edging on insolence. "You left for days without a word. I thought you'd forgotten me entirely." Apollo raised an eyebrow. "Are you blaming me? How could I dare hiding your face and speaking so boldly could be seen as disrespect? Look up." Daphne trembled but didn't move. Abruptly, Apollo turned and left. She pressed her forehead to her knees, eyes closed. She shouldn't have snapped at him. She should have thanked him, flirted, or fainted for a hug. Rational thoughts like distant voices over water and too far. After a brief respite, she sank deeper into despair's mire. Worse than before. Her end hadn't come, but Apollo was still cold, not even asking if she was okay. Great. She felt like crying. Apollo's presence returned. It's a side effect of the golden arrow. You haven't seen me in too long, so you're instinctively despairing, and it's manifesting like this. That's Eros's take. After a longer pause, he added, "But he says there's no precedent for the arrow turning someone into a plant." She stiffened, pinching her arm hard. Eros wouldn't say that unprompted. Stay sharp, she had to cover her tracks. Cassandra's cunning kicked in. She was still hopelessly glum, but at least she could think. Maybe I secretly wished I'd turned into a mushroom or a tree, so I wouldn't feel this way. With her face hidden, maybe she could bluff her way through. Apollo didn't respond. Daphne bit her lip, unsure if she should peek at his expression. Then her wrists were seized. Apollo leaned down, gripping both, pulling her arms apart. She struggled instinctively, but his cool, unyielding fingers held like stone, unmoved by her weak resistance. In the chaos, their eyes locked briefly. She jerked her face away, hiding. Apollo released her right hand, grasping her chin to turn her face back to him. The sudden eye contact, their faces closer than expected, stunned them. Apollo first noticed faint brown lines along her cheeks, faint under pale skin, merging with the branches at her temples, delicate as leaf veins, yet deliberately etched, eerily beautiful. Then, in her wide, shocked pupils, he saw his reflection, towering, filling her vision, as if she could see only him. They froze. The soul-piercing weight of a god's gaze crushed Daphne again. The dark gold rimming Apollo's pupils locked her in place, as if his stare bound and dragged her into their depths, dismantling and reassembling her. She had no secrets left. Terror paralyzed her briefly. Survival instinct overriding the arrow's pull, she forgot shame, feeling only panic. After a moment, she raised a hand to cover her face, trembling uncontrollably. Apollo snapped back, recoiling as if burned. "I thought you were crying," he said stiffly, after a pause. Daphne hid her face in her hands, turning away. "I'm not." He frowned. "Then why hide I must look like a monster? Awful!" As if to prove it, a few weak branches waved limply from her head. Apollo didn't answer right away. "Finally," he said curtly. "Not as bad as when I first met you. Chapter 17, You're So Good to Me. Not as bad as when they first met." Was that a backhanded comfort? Daphne slowly lowered her hands, revealing only her eyes, locking onto Apollo. He'd gotten so close earlier, and now, after so long, she was finally face to face with him again. Still that impossibly perfect, cold face, his true thoughts buried deep. Even so, her lips curved upward. The golden arrow's effect was uncanny. Moments ago, she'd felt lifeless, but a brief encounter with Apollo lifted her spirits. Half teasing, half genuine. She flashed a radiant smile, gazing up at him, her voice soft. You really came back. Apollo's expression didn't budge. How long are you planning to squat on the floor? Daphne moved to stand. But after holding one position too long, her legs cramped, going numb, she wobbled, nearly toppling into Apollo, and lurched sideways. She caught herself against the wall, glancing up just as Apollo's hand dropped back to his side. Their eyes met. Apollo blinked, his gaze flicking to the window before snapping back. As if annoyed at his momentary flinch, he stated flatly, You almost fell. After a pause, he frowned, irritated. What are you laughing at? Daphne raised both hands, grinning. Nothing at all. Too late. She realized the gesture might not mean surrender in this mythic world. Ugh, there went half the fun. May I freshen up? Apollo nodded and turned, pausing at the door as if to say something, then left the stone house without a word. Daphne hugged her arms, lost in thought, then shook her head and used the cistern's spring water to wash her face and body, slipping into clean clothes. The branches on her head were too sensitive to touch, so she let her hair fall loose, pretending they weren't there. Hopefully, they'd be gone by morning, feeling refreshed. She stepped into the outer room and froze. A golden, long-necked bottle sat on the table, unnoticed before. The sealing wax was pristine. She sniffed it, catching a faint, sweet fragrance beneath the honeyed scent. Clutching the bottle, she hurried outside. Apollo was inspecting the flower beds, turning at her approach. Is this ambrosial nectar? For me, Apollo's look screamed. Who else? Daphne pressed the bottle to her chest, eyes sparkling. I only get nectar twice a year, shared with my sisters, barely a sip. But you gave me a whole bottle. Her joy wasn't faked. Nectar, vital for nymphs and divine beings, was precious. A single gulp could erase accumulated fatigue. Extra servings depended on divine gifts. It might even prolong her body's endurance, buying her time. Even if not, nectar was divine, its sweet taste beyond description. Apollo seemed put off by her excitement, looking away. Nectar's just something Olympians grab at will. I know, Daphne said earnestly, but I still want to thank you. For the nectar, for giving me a place to stay, for saving me time and again. Her heartbeat thundered, cheeks warming. She couldn't tell if this bubbling joy was blind infatuation or the thrill of progress. Under the golden arrow, true or false was a moot point, not something she needed to untangle now. You're so good to me, she said softly, clutching the bottle like a priceless treasure. Apollo's gaze turned peculiar. When she looked up, puzzled, he changed the subject casually. The priests I chose will arrive soon, and the temple's nearly done. I'll deal with that pool later and won't spare extra effort watching you. If you don't want to drown, stay put. Daphne nodded obediently, then, after a beat, asked, What about the flowers I offer daily? Not needed? Until you recover, don't step into my temple grounds. Yes, undeterred. She paused, then added, Could I ask the mountain god or giants to deliver the flowers instead? She glanced at the swaying blooms around them. These flowers gathered here because of you. It'd be a shame if you didn't see them. I've seen them, he said after a long pause, and I'll come back. Daphne's face lit up. Apollo didn't let her speak, his words quick and sharp, almost gritted, to make sure you don't turn into some weird shape from despair again. The golden-haired nymph nodded eagerly, seemingly oblivious. Was her goofy demeanour an act, or the arrow's fervour clouding her mind? Apollo fell silent for a moment. Aren't you drinking? Daphne blinked, confused. The nectar. I'll savour it later. He raised a brow. If you're hoarding it like a treasure, there won't be another bottle. Caught. Daphne's eyes darted, and she laughed sheepishly. She broke the wax seal, cradling the bottle, and cautiously sipped. The cool, sweet liquid seemed to open every pore, and she squinted in delight, taking a bigger gulp. Sighing as her eyes closed, Apollo's gaze lingered on her profile, then drifted upward. Tiny buds sprouted on her branches, blooming into clusters of yellow flowers in the soft dusk light, trembling happily. Daphne was oblivious, nectar, and she was blooming with joy. She licked a droplet from her lips, surprised. "What are you laughing at?" Apollo's expression vanished instantly as nothing. The next morning, Apollo had a visitor. "You're early." Bathed in dazzling dawn, a golden-haired woman turned. Her features mirrored Apollo's, a silver bow slung across her back, a deerskin cloak draped over one shoulder. Her knee-length tunic revealed toned calves, marking her as a huntress, his twin sister, Artemis. The huntress goddess's face was calm, exuding regal authority, her lips curving slightly only for Apollo. "I didn't expect to finish temple here." Apollo cracked a faint smile, resisting the urge to brag in front of his sister. The mountain god helped a lot. Poseidon didn't interfere either. Artemis nodded crisply, cutting to the chase. "As you asked. I've sent deer and nymphs to escort the sailors. They'll reach Delphi by noon. These wilds are my hunting grounds. Even Ares wouldn't dare meddle. With you involved, there's no need to worry," Apollo said, gesturing. "You're not leaving right away, are you?" Artemis shook her head, a loose strand of gold hair falling to her neck, unnoticed. She scanned the surroundings slowly. "You know I dislike noise. Soon, your mortal abode will haze with sacrificial smoke, and this forest will lose its quiet beauty, disturbed by mortal footsteps and carts. Building a temple here makes me the villain." They shared a smile, and Apollo pressed. "Stay for nectar or ambrosial wine at least. Plus, I need a favour." "What, there's a pool in Delphi's woods, formed from Hera's mirror shards. It lures lovesick travellers and drowns them. I'll purify it later, not now. You want me to guard it?" "No," Apollo said, choosing his words carefully. "A nymph under my protection nearly drowned there before. I'll make my first prophecy when the altar's first incense burns. I need full focus. If she dies during that, it'll be a hassle." The sworn virgin goddess raised a brow, eerily like Apollo. "You want me to protect your lover, dear brother? That's hardly proper." He choked, face tight. "No, I don't have a lover. It's just Artemis echoed, blue eyes glinting with mischief. Apollo shut his eyes, then briefly recounted his feud with Eros. Artemis fell silent, her tone wry. "You know Eros wants you to fall for this nymph, yet you let her stay in Delphi and check on her. Unlike me, you're too soft-hearted. She's caught up in this because of me. I'm obliged to protect her," Apollo said, listing reasons. "Heartbroken mortals often curse their lovers before death. Fate isn't kind to gods in such matters. I'm not taking chances." Leto's daughter tilted her chin. "Then give her to me." Apollo froze. "I'm the guardian of maidens. With me, she'll be safe until the arrow fades." "It's not that simple. If she goes too long without seeing me, she develops odd symptoms." Annoyed at his own hesitance, Apollo pressed on. "I know what you're worried about, but I'm in control. She isn't and won't be my lover. Artemis. I just need you to keep an eye on her during my prophecy to ensure she doesn't die inexplicably." They locked eyes, unyielding, until Artemis crossed her arms. "Fine. I'm curious about the bait Eros picked." Artemis easily found the stone house on the sunlit slope. With a flick of her hand, an egret soared from the trees, circling above. The huntress goddess borrowed its keen eyes, studying the vibrant flower beds in the oversized house, unfit for one. Recalling the egret's sliver of will, she stroked her accompanying doe, murmuring with a smirk, generous, even by his standards. "Don't you think?" After a while, a golden-haired girl emerged. Unsurprisingly, she was strikingly beautiful. Apollo would be hard-pressed to deny it. Oblivious to divine scrutiny, the nymph named Daphne tended the garden. Unafraid of dirt, she weeded and pruned deftly, her touch coaxing the flowers into vibrant life. Artemis concluded a mountain nymph. Clearly, as the sun climbed, Daphne vanished back inside. By afternoon, sacrificial smoke rose from the temple, the muses' lyre-strung chants faintly audible. Mortals, guided by divine will, reached the new temple, beginning the first rites. Hearing the commotion, Daphne stepped out, gazing briefly toward the sacred music and haze, then quietly returned inside. Contrary to Apollo's hints, she didn't seem prone to wandering, but almost instantly, Artemis reconsidered. Daphne, now in a different dress, slipped out, scanning her surroundings warily. She sped up, moving away from the temple, Sprinting through the woods, Artemis followed. Daphne's pace was astonishingly fast, nearly outrunning even a goddess accustomed to chasing prey. One after the other, they left Delphi's foothills, exiting Apollo's sensory range, reaching the hills between sea and mountains. Daphne never slowed, her destination clear, pressing forward. Artemis sensed another god's presence in the land ahead and halted instinctively. Trespassing a god's sacred space was tantamount to war, from afar. She watched Daphne climb a small hill without hesitation, vanishing behind the stone walls atop it. It was the sanctuary of Eros, god of desire. Chapter 18 at its best if you never see him again. This was Daphne's first visit to Eros' sanctuary. Unlike grand temples with colonnades and statues, sanctuaries didn't need splendor. Any place tied to a god could become one, often just an open-air altar or small shrine for simple prayers and offerings. When she'd gone with Parnassus's nymphs to see Narcissus, Daphne had passed this sanctuary, quietly noting its location. Today, Apollo's Delphi temple was opening, keeping him occupied. If she missed this chance, Delphi would be his domain, and tracking her would be as easy as a child peering into a dollhouse. Slipping away to consult Eros would be nearly impossible. It had to be now. Rustic stone walls encircled a two-tiered altar, its top dusted with the ashes of burnt offerings. No other devotees were present. Daphne stepped forward, reciting softly, "Eros, god of love and desire, born from ocean foam, I beg your ear, I plead your presence." Nothing happened. She waited, then circled the altar, puzzled, scanning the wall's base for a rabbit, Eros's telltale sign. Nothing. Either Eros was ignoring her, or the god of desire was busy tormenting someone else. He'd find her eventually, for now. Daphne leaned against the stone wall to rest, feeling strong enough to return to the stone house. She'd dig up some plants on the way back as an excuse, just in case. Descending the hill, Daphne retraced her steps. "Nymph," a voice rang out behind her. She jumped forward, startled, before turning. A golden-haired woman in a short tunic stood a few paces away, faintly haloed in golden light. Daphne, realizing this was facing a god, lowered her gaze in reverence. "Look up." Daphne obeyed, slowly meeting her eyes. The goddess's face was unreadable, but her piercing blue eyes carried a familiar weight, that chilling beauty, and the silver bow slung across her shoulder, identical to Apollo's. Daphne knew who this was. Queen of beasts, unerring archer. Artemis, what is your command? I've heard of you from Apollo. The words made Daphne's body go rigid. Apollo hadn't fully trusted her, so he'd asked his twin to spy on her. She was exposed. She'd been careless, forgetting that Apollo wasn't the only deity she needed to guard against. Her thoughts froze in panic. She summoned every ounce of strength to keep from collapsing in fear, blinking mechanically, once, twice. Her mind thawed, grinding to life. Think. Now. Survival instincts kicked in, seizing a faint glimmer of a chance Eros hadn't answered her prayer. Thank goodness. The love god must have sensed something was off. No evidence directly tied her to Eros. Her only clear misstep was disobeying Apollo's orders, privately praying to Eros again. This wasn't hopeless. Listen to Artemis first. Daphne nodded silently, adopting a respectful posture. Artemis seemed surprised by her composure, raising a sharp brow and cutting to the chase. "I won't ask why you're at Eros' sanctuary. I'm not interested in your excuses, but don't fear, I won't harm you. Not yet, at least. I have no reason to." Daphne clutched her skirt. She wasn't naive enough to miss the veiled threat. "Come with me." Artemis stepped forward. Daphne instinctively backed away, but the huntress goddess closed the distance in one stride, looming too close. Overwhelmed by her divine aura, Daphne couldn't move. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice came out weak, words slurring like a scolded child's. She felt a flicker of disgust at her own helplessness against gods. But power and status defined this world's rules. She had to play along to escape. Artemis was patient. I wander freely. Wherever prey roams on the dark earth is my next stop. Eros's tricks don't work on me, so he fears me. I'll demand he give you a leaden arrow. Even if he refuses, I'll protect you until the golden arrow fades, ensuring no one harms you. My nymphs would welcome a new companion. As the guardian of maidens, Artemis was powerful, unbound, fearless of gods and demigods, a nymph's idol. If Daphne were truly an innocent nymph caught in Apollo and Eros's feud, she'd leap at the offer. But she'd fought hard for her place in Delphi. How could she abandon it? Daphne opened her mouth to cite the arrow's mysterious side effects, but Artemis pressed on, leaving no room to interrupt. I've heard the arrow makes you sick with longing. Don't worry, I'll teach you to resist the fire of desire. Her reasoning was thorough, undeniably beneficial. Daphne couldn't find a counter-argument. Artemis studied her calmly, then said, "Nymph, you should be honoured to join me." The tone was gentle, but Daphne trembled. Though subtler than her brother, Artemis's natural condescension matched Apollo's. The consequences of angering her were easy to imagine. The rubble pile above Telphusa's spring flashed in Daphne's mind. She stayed silent. Artemis didn't press, just watched. The goddess's pure blue eyes, slightly paler than Apollo's, were like lakes, their undercurrents hidden beneath a serene surface. Under her gaze, Daphne felt like a struggling insect. But she had to try. "I'll follow your command, but your noble brother Apollo has shown me great kindness. I should at least thank him before leaving with you." Artemis smiled, a hint of indulgent mockery in it. "You can thank him after the arrow's effect fades." A half-beat pause. "It's best if you never see him again." In a hazy daze, as someone called her, indistinctly, Cassandra. The name snapped her awake. She opened her eyes, scanning her surroundings. Clouds and mist swirled endlessly, gathering and dissolving. She'd seen this once before. After death veiled her vision, she'd found herself in this vast sea of clouds. You finally reacted. Following the voice, she saw Eros perched on a pillar-like cloud, cheek propped on one hand, grinning down at her. Memories flooded back, and she fell silent. Artemis, unable to defy the goddess. She'd followed her, drifting farther from Delphi. Artemis summoned her chariot, drawn by 2 stags, and, likely to prevent escape, ordered Daphne to ride alongside her, at dusk. Artemis paused by a woodland spring. Local nymphs rushed to serve Leto's daughter. As Daphne had arrived with the goddess, they assumed she was favoured, allowed the rare honour of riding beside her, and cast envious glances her way. Daphne could only smile faintly. Weighed by worry, she slipped away early from the nymphs singing and dancing to please the goddess, finding a cave to rest in. She didn't try to flee. Artemis was surely watching. She hadn't expected to meet Eros in her dreams. As if reading her thoughts, Eros explained, "When you sleep, your soul's half unmoored. With some effort, I can pull you here. Don't worry, Artemis won't notice. At most, she'll think your sleeping face looks eerily peaceful, like you're in eternal slumber. Your situation's tricky." Despite his words, the boyish god of desire swung his legs idly, unfazed, even a bit gleeful. She admitted bluntly, "I messed up. I didn't account for other gods watching me." "No. You underestimated how much Apollo cares about you. That's the root of it," Eros said, his smile widening. "Think about it. It's a good thing, right? If he didn't care, he wouldn't have asked Artemis to guard you. He respects his sister and doesn't trouble her lightly." She didn't comment, asking instead, "Does Apollo know I've been taken? He's still deep in Delphi's temple?" Eros hopped off the cloud pillar, sauntering toward her with a grin. "Guess what he'll do when he finds you're gone?" She didn't answer immediately. Compared to his initial outright rejection, her persistent efforts had closed the gap with Apollo. Recalling his demeanour when she sprouted, Cassandra sensed he didn't quite love her, but he'd developed a sliver of fondness. But affection between men and women was as fleeting as morning dew or evening mist. A shift in the wind, a touch of sunlight, and it vanished. She'd secured her place in Delphi by playing the victim. She knew he suspected her, even harboured fleeting murderous intent. When she pushed closer, duty kept him from pulling away, and maybe, for a moment, he was drawn in. But if she disappeared, perhaps Apollo had been waiting for someone to take her, a ticking time bomb, off his hands. Artemis's intervention gave him no reason to object. "I don't think he will," Cassandra said. Eros tilted his head, as if her answer bored him. "You seem to lack faith in yourself. And in me." She pointed to her heart. "Unrequited love makes people cling to delusions, misreading kindness. Your golden arrow is powerful, so I can't afford that mistake. I'd rather be pessimistic. You've done well so far. I worried the arrow might push you to confess everything to Apollo, but you didn't." Eros stared, his interest chilling her. "For you, deceit and love coexist naturally? I'm curious. What happened in your original life to shape such a fascinating, fractured way of handling things?" Cassandra said nothing. Eros sighed, like an elder facing a stubborn youth. The mature air clashed with his eternally youthful look, making him seem all the more inscrutable. "If you won't wait for Apollo to act, you have two choices. First, obey Artemis. Wait for the arrow to fade, then find a way back to him. I can ensure your body holds up until then. Though, well, there might be minor issues like before." Cassandra clenched her fists. She wasn't about to throw away her progress. Eros, catching her expression, grinned, a charming yet wicked smile. "You've probably guessed the second option, escape Artemis and return to Apollo. Don't dismiss it. Hear me out. I forgot to mention, as the god of love and desire, I can sense anyone's preferences in these matters. So, I crafted your body with every trait Apollo desires." She blinked, stunned, taking a moment to grasp Eros's meaning. In other words, Daphne was Apollo's ideal type. The mischievous love god's smile deepened, tossing out a slow, enticing offer. "So, my dear Daphne, want to bet on whether Leto's son will shield you from his sister?"